7 phrases manipulators use to destroy your self-worth, and why you don't notice. Right now, someone is saying something to you that sounds harmless. It might even sound like care. Perhaps it resembles honesty or helpful criticism. But these words work like slow-acting poison. They penetrate your consciousness, settle there, and begin invisibly destroying what you think about yourself. And the most terrifying part? You don't even realize it's happening. You believe the problem is you, that you're too sensitive, that you need to be stronger, more resilient, less reactive. But in reality, you've become a victim of one of the most sophisticated forms of psychological abuse: manipulation through language. These aren't random words. They're carefully chosen weapons designed to dismantle your sense of self while making you think you're the problem. They're delivered with precision, often repeatedly, until they become the voice in your own head. The manipulation doesn't announce itself.
It doesn't arrive with warning signs or clear boundaries that tell you danger is approaching. It slips into conversations disguised as concern, as truth-telling, as love, as care for your well-being. The person saying these phrases might not even realize they're weaponizing language. They might believe they're being helpful, honest, or protective. Or perhaps they know exactly what they're doing, consciously deploying tactics that have worked before. Either way, the result is the same. Your self-worth erodes one conversation at a time, one phrase at a time, one small cut at a time. You start questioning your perception, your memory, your judgment, your value as a human being. You begin apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain you. And all of this happens so gradually, so incrementally, that you don't notice the transformation until you barely recognize yourself anymore. Until you look in the mirror and wonder where you went. Words have power that extends far beyond their surface meaning. Language shapes reality, creates beliefs, and constructs the internal narratives we live by. When someone physically harms you, the damage is visible and undeniable. Bruises appear, bones break, blood flows. Others can see the evidence. Society recognizes physical abuse. Laws exist to punish it. Support systems activate to help victims. But psychological manipulation leaves invisible scars that cut deeper than any physical wound. Scars that others can't see and sometimes don't believe exist. Research from the American Psychological Association demonstrates that victims of chronic verbal and emotional abuse show brain changes similar to those found in victims of physical trauma. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, regions responsible for memory and decision-making, actually shrink under sustained emotional attack. This isn't metaphorical damage. This is measurable, observable, neurological harm inflicted through carefully chosen words, repeated patterns, and systematic erosion of self-concept. The reason these phrases work so effectively is that they exploit a fundamental vulnerability in human psychology: our deep, primal need for validation and connection with others. From birth, humans are wired to seek approval from others, particularly from those we depend on or care about. This served our ancestors well in the ancestral environment. Being rejected from the tribe meant almost certain death from predators, starvation, or exposure. So our brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social feedback, to signs of acceptance or rejection. We're designed to care deeply about what others think of us, because for most of human history, social connection was literally life or death.
Manipulators understand this vulnerability, consciously or unconsciously, and they exploit it ruthlessly.
They use language that triggers your deepest insecurities, while positioning themselves as the authority on your worth, the arbiter of what's acceptable and what's not. And because you're wired to trust the people closest to you, because evolution taught you that social bonds are survival, you accept their assessment as truth, even when it contradicts everything you know about yourself. Let's examine the first phrase that destroys self-worth from the inside out. You're too sensitive. This statement seems innocent on the surface. It sounds like a simple observation about your personality or emotional responses. But it's actually a sophisticated form of invalidation that accomplishes multiple destructive goals simultaneously, like a Swiss Army knife of psychological abuse. First, it dismisses your emotional response as excessive, inappropriate, or wrong. Second, it shifts responsibility from their behavior to your reaction, making your feelings the problem rather than their actions. Your healing starts right now in this moment. Third, it positions them as the rational, reasonable one, while casting you as emotionally unstable, overreactive, and unreliable. Fourth, it establishes them as the judge of appropriate emotional response, giving them power to determine what's reasonable to feel. When someone tells you you're too sensitive, they're not describing your feelings. They're discrediting them. They're teaching you that your emotional responses can't be trusted, that your internal compass is broken, that you need their guidance to understand what's worth feeling upset about. Here's how this phrase typically appears in conversation, the context that makes it so damaging. You express hurt over something they said or did. Maybe they made a cruel joke at your expense in front of others. Maybe they forgot something important to you for the third time this month. Maybe they dismissed your accomplishment or belittled your concern about something meaningful. Maybe they broke a promise or violated a boundary you'd clearly established. Your response is natural and appropriate given what happened. You feel hurt because hurtful things happened. Your emotional response is proportional to the situation. But instead of acknowledging their behavior, apologizing, or validating your feelings, they respond with, "You're too sensitive," or its many variations. "You take everything so personally." "You're overreacting. It was just a joke." "You need thicker skin. You're being dramatic. Not everything is about you. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Each variation carries the same essential message. Your perception is flawed. Your feelings are excessive and inappropriate. The problem is your sensitivity and not their actions that caused the sensitivity to emerge. The insidious brilliance of this manipulation is that it makes you doubt yourself at the most fundamental level, attacking the foundation of your identity and self-trust. You start questioning whether your feelings are valid, or if you're creating problems where none exist. Maybe you are too sensitive compared to some undefined normal standard. Maybe everyone else would have laughed at that joke instead of feeling hurt. Maybe you do overreact to things that other people handle easily. Maybe there's something wrong with your emotional calibration that makes you different from everyone else. This self-doubt is precisely the goal of the manipulation. Because once you stop trusting your own emotional responses, once you start second-guessing your feelings before you express them, you become dependent on the manipulator to tell you what's reasonable to feel. They become the arbiter of appropriate emotion. They gain the power to define your reality. And in that dynamic, they gain complete control over your internal reality. You stop advocating for yourself because you're never quite sure if your hurt is legitimate, or if you're just being too sensitive again. too reactive, too emotional, too much. Research on emotional invalidation shows how profoundly it damages psychological well-being across multiple domains of functioning. Dr. Marsha Linehan, creator of dialectical behavior therapy and a leading expert on emotional regulation, identified emotional invalidation as a core factor in the development of emotional dysregulation and various mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and personality disorders. When people's emotions are consistently dismissed, minimized, or criticized, they lose the ability to trust their own experiences and perceptions. They develop what psychologists call emotion phobia, becoming afraid of their own feelings because those feelings have been repeatedly labeled as wrong, excessive, inappropriate, or shameful. This creates a devastating cycle where the victim suppresses genuine emotions to avoid criticism, which leads to increased psychological distress because suppressed emotions don't disappear, which the manipulator then uses as further evidence of instability or oversensitivity. The victim can't win. Expression leads to invalidation. Suppression leads to distress. And both outcomes serve the manipulator's goal of maintaining control while appearing reasonable. The second phrase operates with equal stealth and perhaps even greater social acceptance. "I'm just being honest." This statement weaponizes truthfulness, transforming it from a virtue into a vehicle for cruelty, while maintaining plausible deniability. When someone prefaces or follows a hurtful comment with, "I'm just being honest," they're performing a clever manipulation that's difficult to counter. They're positioning themselves as courageously truthful in a world of pleasant lies, while implicitly suggesting that your hurt is unreasonable, given that they're just telling the truth. After all, they're just being honest, just telling it like it is, just refusing to sugarcoat reality. And if the truth hurts you, if reality causes you pain, isn't that your problem rather than theirs? This framing makes it nearly impossible to object without seeming like you're opposed to honesty itself, like you prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. It's a trap disguised as transparency, a weapon disguised as virtue, cruelty disguised as courage. Here's what this looks like in practice: the real-world deployment of this manipulation tactic. They make a cutting remark about your appearance, your intelligence, your capabilities, your worth or your character. Maybe they comment on your weight, your career achievements, your parenting, your financial situation, or your personality traits. The comment is designed to hurt, whether consciously or unconsciously. When you react with hurt or offense, when you call out the comment as inappropriate or cruel, they respond with, "I'm just being honest," or "Someone needs to tell you the truth," or "I'm the only one who cares enough to be real with you," or "Would you prefer I lie like everyone else?" Notice the layered manipulation here, the multiple attacks happening simultaneously. First, they've delivered a blow to your self-esteem through the initial comment. Second, they've reframed that blow as an act of caring or courage, making themselves the hero of this interaction. Third, they've positioned themselves as uniquely truthful while implying everyone else is lying to you out of pity or politeness. Fourth, they've made you the problem for not appreciating their honesty, for preferring lies, for being unable to handle reality. It's psychological judo, using your own values against you, making your virtues into vulnerabilities they can exploit. The critical distinction they're obscuring is this: honesty and cruelty are not the same thing, though manipulators work hard to conflate them. Truthfulness doesn't require brutality. You can be honest without being destructive. Real honesty considers context, timing, delivery, and necessity. It balances truth with compassion. It asks whether the truth needs to be spoken at all, whether this is the right time and place, whether it can be delivered in a way that respects the other person's dignity and humanity, and whether the goal is genuinely to help or simply to wound. Manipulative honesty ignores all of these considerations entirely. It uses truth as a blunt weapon, then hides behind the virtue of truthfulness to avoid accountability for the damage inflicted. This isn't honesty. It's cruelty wearing honesty's mask. It's aggression disguised as virtue. And the confusion between honest communication and brutal attack is precisely what makes this manipulation so effective and so difficult to identify and resist. Studies on communication and relationships consistently show that how something is said matters as much as, if not more than, what is said when it comes to relationship satisfaction and psychological well-being. Dr. John Gottman's decades of research on relationship dynamics, studying thousands of couples over many years, identified contempt expressed through mockery and sarcasm disguised as honesty as one of the strongest predictors of relationship failure. When people consistently deliver honest feedback in ways that demean, belittle, or mock their partner, they're not helping that person grow or improve. They're destroying the relationship and the person's self-concept simultaneously. The victim internalizes these truths as facts about themselves, rather than recognizing them as one person's opinions delivered with unnecessary cruelty and possible malicious intent. Over time, the victim's self-image becomes a collection of the manipulator's cutting, honest observations, each one eroding confidence and self-worth further, building a self-concept based not on reality, but on the manipulator's distorted and often deliberately damaging commentary. The third phrase is perhaps the most insidious because it sounds superficially like acceptance. "You're so lucky I put up with you." This statement masquerades as tolerance while actually communicating profound rejection and conditional acceptance. It tells you that you're fundamentally flawed, difficult, burdensome, problematic, and that being with you requires extraordinary patience or sacrifice on their part. It positions the relationship as a favor they're doing you, rather than a mutually beneficial partnership of equals. And it creates a power imbalance, where you owe them gratitude and compliance simply for tolerating your existence in their life. This phrase doesn't build connection or intimacy. It builds debt. It makes you feel like you're constantly in arrears, always owing them something, never quite enough to repay the enormous favor they're doing by staying with someone as difficult as you are. It transforms love from a mutual exchange into a one-sided transaction, where you're perpetually the debtor and they're the long-suffering creditor. This manipulation often appears during conflicts or when you've expressed a need or boundary, which is strategic timing designed to punish you for self-advocacy. You've asked for something reasonable, more quality time together, better communication about schedules or feelings, basic respect in front of others, shared responsibility for household tasks or childcare. Instead of addressing your request on its merits, instead of negotiating or compromising, they respond with, "You're so lucky I put up with you," or its many variations. "No one else would tolerate this. You're so difficult to deal with. I don't know why I stay. Anyone else would have left by now. You should be grateful I'm still here. Most people wouldn't put up with half of what you do." These statements accomplish several destructive goals simultaneously. They punish you for expressing needs, teaching you that voicing what you want results in rejection and criticism. They make you grateful for the bare minimum of decent treatment. They create fear of abandonment that keeps you compliant.
And they establish a hierarchy where you're the lucky one to be chosen by them, rather than two equals choosing each other freely. The psychological impact of this repeated message is devastating to self-concept and relationship dynamics. The victim begins to believe they're fundamentally unlovable, that their core self is so flawed that no one else would want them. They start to believe they're difficult and demanding for having normal human needs for connection, respect, and partnership. They internalize the message that they should be grateful for any scraps of affection or attention, that expecting more is entitled or ungrateful. This belief creates behavior changes that further entrench the unhealthy dynamic. The victim stops making requests because they've learned requests lead to rejection. They suppress needs because expressing needs marks them as difficult. They become increasingly accommodating and agreeable, bending themselves into pretzels, trying desperately to prove they're not difficult, trying to earn the love that should be freely given to someone in a partnership. They become smaller and smaller, taking up less space, asking for less, expecting less, apologizing for existing, until they've essentially disappeared into the relationship, becoming an accessory to the manipulator's life rather than a full person. And still, they believe they're lucky to be tolerated at all. Research on attachment and self-worth reveals how deeply these messages affect identity formation and future relationship patterns. When people receive consistent messages that they're burdensome or difficult to love, when they're repeatedly told they should be grateful that someone tolerates them, these messages become part of their core self-concept and identity. They develop what psychologists call a negative working model of self, believing at a fundamental level that they're unworthy of love and that relationships require them to earn affection through perfect behavior, constant accommodation, and suppression of their authentic self. This model doesn't stay confined to the relationship where it was created. It follows them into future relationships, making them vulnerable to further exploitation because they've been trained to accept less than they deserve. They've learned to be grateful for basic respect, which should be the foundation of any relationship. They've internalized the belief that love is something they're lucky to receive from someone who's doing them a favor, rather than something they deserve and should expect as a baseline in any healthy partnership. The fourth phrase operates through comparison, one of the most painful forms of evaluation. Why can't you be more like them? This statement weaponizes comparison to make you feel inadequate, insufficient, and fundamentally lacking. It holds up someone else as the standard you're failing to meet, whether that someone is real or imaginary. It communicates that you're deficient exactly as you are, that your way of being in the world is wrong or inferior. Whether the comparison is to an ex-partner, a sibling, a friend, a co-worker, a celebrity, or even a fictional ideal constructed specifically to make you feel inadequate, the message is unmistakably clear. You're not enough. Someone else is better, more desirable, more valuable. You need to fundamentally change who you are to be acceptable or worthy of love. This isn't motivation or inspiration designed to help you grow. It's degradation disguised as inspiration, cruelty disguised as encouragement. This comparison appears in countless forms throughout the relationship. My ex used to understand me without me having to explain everything. Your sister never complains this much about anything. Normal people don't act like this over small things. Everyone else manages fine with what I give them. Why can't you just be happy like them? Other women don't make such a big deal about this. My friend's husband never questions her like you question me. Your brother has his life together. Why don't you? Each variation drives the same knife deeper into your self-concept. It tells you that who you are is fundamentally wrong, that your way of being, thinking, feeling, or functioning is inferior to some undefined standard that you're somehow failing to meet, that you're failing a test everyone else passes effortlessly. The comparison is particularly cruel because it's impossible to defend against effectively. You can't argue that you're enough when someone is perpetually holding up examples of people who are allegedly more than you, better than you, more lovable than you. The psychological mechanism at work here is called social comparison, and it's a deeply human tendency that manipulators exploit mercilessly for their own purposes. Research by Leon Festinger in the 1950s established that people naturally evaluate themselves by comparing to others in their social environment. This tendency served evolutionary purposes, helping people assess their standing in social hierarchies, identify areas where growth or learning might be beneficial, and understand social norms and expectations. But when weaponized through constant negative comparison, when turned into a tool of control and degradation, this natural tendency becomes a destructive force rather than a constructive one. The victim begins compulsively comparing themselves to others and, always, inevitably, finding themselves lacking in the comparison. They develop an external locus of evaluation, meaning they judge their worth based entirely on how they measure up to others, rather than based on internal values, personal growth, or their own standards and goals. What makes this manipulation particularly effective is that there's always someone to compare unfavorably to, an infinite supply of people who seem better in some way. The manipulator can always find someone thinner, more successful, more agreeable, less emotional, more organized, more put together, less demanding, more understanding, more attractive, more accomplished. The standard is perpetually moving, always just out of reach, no matter how much you stretch to meet it. This creates a psychological state called learned helplessness, where the victim believes that no matter what they do, no matter how hard they try, they'll never be good enough to meet the standard being set for them. They stop trying to meet the standard because the standard is designed to be unattainable by definition. Instead, they accept their position as perpetually inadequate, fundamentally flawed, always less than. And they remain in the relationship because they believe no one else would want someone as flawed and insufficient as they are. After all, if they're not good enough for this person who tolerates them, how could they possibly be good enough for anyone else? The fifth phrase is a masterpiece of projection and reality distortion. You're the crazy one, not me. This statement attempts to flip reality entirely, turning the world upside down. When you point out their problematic behavior, when you identify patterns of manipulation, when you call out the ways they've hurt you, they don't address the content of what you're saying. Instead, they attack your sanity, your perception, your grip on reality itself, your mental stability. This is gaslighting in its purest and most damaging form. It's an attempt to make you doubt your own mind, your own memory, your own judgment, to convince you that your accurate observations of their manipulation are actually evidence of your instability, paranoia, or mental illness. It's psychological warfare that leaves the victim questioning everything they know to be true, everything they've experienced, everything they remember. And if you can't trust your own perception of reality, if your mind is unreliable, you become completely dependent on the manipulator to tell you what's real,
what actually happened, what's true, and what's delusion. This phrase typically emerges when the victim has started recognizing the manipulation and naming it clearly, which represents a threat to the manipulator's control. You've called out their behavior. You've identified patterns in how they treat you. You've set a boundary or made a request for change based on your clear understanding of what's happening. This growing awareness is dangerous to them because it means you might leave or demand different treatment. Instead of acknowledging any wrongdoing, instead of taking responsibility or demonstrating accountability, they respond with, "You're crazy, you're losing it, you're imagining things. That never happened the way you remember it. You're paranoid, you're delusional, you need serious help. No one else sees what you're claiming to see. You're making things up in your head." These statements serve multiple purposes simultaneously. They discredit your observations and make them seem unreliable. They position you as mentally unstable and therefore not credible. They shift focus from their behavior to your supposed mental state. And they isolate you by suggesting your perceptions are so distorted that you can't be trusted even by yourself. The term gaslighting comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight, in which a husband manipulates his wife into believing she's insane by systematically dimming their gas-powered lights, while insisting emphatically that the lights haven't changed and that she's imagining the dimming. The psychological and therapeutic community adopted this term to describe a manipulation tactic where the abuser denies the victim's reality so persistently and convincingly that the victim begins doubting their own sanity and grip on reality. Research on gaslighting reveals how profoundly it damages psychological well-being across all domains of functioning. Victims develop severe anxiety, depression, and what therapists call reality testing problems, where they genuinely can't trust their own perception, memory, and judgment anymore. They second-guess everything. They question every memory. They can't make decisions because they don't trust their own assessment of situations. Their grip on reality becomes so tenuous that they become almost entirely dependent on others to tell them what's real and what's imagined. What makes this manipulation so devastating is that questioning your own sanity is one of the most terrifying experiences a human being can have. Humans need to trust their perception of reality to function in the world, to make decisions, to navigate relationships, to understand cause and effect. When that trust is systematically undermined through persistent denial and contradiction, the psychological distress is immense and overwhelming. The victim becomes hypervigilant, constantly checking their memory against other evidence, recording conversations to prove to themselves what was actually said, saving messages and emails, desperately trying to gather proof that they're not crazy, that their memory is reliable, that what they experienced actually happened. But the manipulator has planted the seed of doubt deep in their psyche. And once that seed is planted, it grows and spreads. The victim starts questioning everything about themselves. Did that conversation really happen the way I remember? Or am I distorting it? Am I overreacting to normal behavior? Am I being paranoid, or is this really happening? Maybe I am the crazy one after all. Maybe everyone else is right and I'm the problem. This confusion is precisely the goal of gaslighting. A confused victim is a controllable victim. Someone who doesn't trust their own mind will trust the manipulator's version of reality instead. The sixth phrase operates through conditional love and endless testing. If you really loved me, you would do this. This statement weaponizes affection, making love something you must constantly prove through compliance with their demands. It establishes that love isn't demonstrated through your words, your presence, your commitment, your care, your loyalty, or your emotional investment. Love is only proven by doing whatever they want, whenever they want it, without hesitation or complaint. This phrase turns love into a transaction where your feelings are perpetually in question, constantly requiring validation through specific actions they demand. It transforms a relationship into a series of tests you must pass to prove your devotion, your commitment, your worthiness of the relationship. And because the tests keep coming, because there's always another demand to meet, you never quite prove it enough. The goalpost keeps moving. Today's proof of love becomes tomorrow's expected baseline, requiring even more to demonstrate the same level of devotion. This manipulation appears whenever you hesitate, set a boundary, or prioritize your own needs over their wants. If you really loved me, you'd cancel your plans with your friends. If you cared about me, you wouldn't spend time with them when I want to see you. Someone who loved me would do this without complaining or making me ask twice. I guess you don't love me enough to make this sacrifice. Love means sacrifice, and you're not willing to sacrifice anything for me. If our relationship mattered to you, this wouldn't even be a question. I'd do this for you without thinking twice. But apparently, you don't feel the same way. Each variation carries the same implicit threat. Your love is insufficient, questionable, possibly fake. And unless you comply with this demand, your love is in question, and the relationship is at risk. This creates enormous pressure to demonstrate love through increasingly unreasonable acts of compliance, through sacrifices that harm you, through actions that violate your own values or boundaries. The victim finds themselves doing things they're uncomfortable with, sacrificing things that matter deeply to them, crossing their own boundaries, and compromising their own integrity, all to prove love that should never have been questioned in the first place. The psychological principle being exploited here is called reciprocity and social proof of affection. Humans naturally want to demonstrate love and care for people they value. This is healthy and normal in relationships. Love inspires generosity, consideration, and willing sacrifice for the well-being of someone you care about. But manipulators pervert this beautiful instinct, twisting it into something ugly. They make you prove love by meeting unreasonable demands that have nothing to do with genuine caring or the health of the relationship. Real love doesn't require constant proof through compliance. Real love doesn't hold affection hostage until demands are met like a ransom payment. Real love doesn't question devotion every time someone exercises normal autonomy or maintains healthy boundaries. But manipulative love operates exactly this way, creating a transactional relationship where love is currency exchanged for obedience. It's always conditional, always requiring demonstration through specific actions, always just out of reach, no matter how much you prove it through sacrifice and compliance. Research on attachment styles and relationship dynamics shows that this constant demand for proof creates anxious attachment in victims who might otherwise have secure attachment patterns based on their early experiences. They become hypervigilant about their partner's emotional state, constantly monitoring for signs of displeasure or dissatisfaction. They consistently sacrifice their own needs, wants, and boundaries to maintain the relationship and avoid the threat of abandonment. They develop what psychologists call self-silencing, where they suppress their authentic self, their real thoughts and feelings and desires, to avoid conflict or rejection. The relationship becomes a performance, where they're constantly acting the part of devoted partner, terrified that any moment of authenticity or self-advocacy might result in accusations that they don't really love enough, that they're selfish, that they don't care about the relationship. They lose themselves entirely in the performance, forgetting who they were before they started trying to prove their love was real.
The seventh phrase completes the circle of manipulation and eliminates any possibility of accountability. You made me do this. This statement eliminates the manipulator's accountability by transferring responsibility for their actions entirely onto you. Whatever they did, however they hurt you, whatever line they crossed, it's actually your fault for provoking them. You caused their behavior through your actions, your words, your tone, your facial expression, your existence in their space. This is blame shifting at its most destructive and most dangerous. It teaches you that you're responsible not just for your own behavior, but for theirs as well. That you control their actions through your own. That their anger, their cruelty, their violence, their cheating, their lies, their broken promises are all consequences of things you did or didn't do. You become the author of your own abuse in this twisted narrative, which creates a psychological trap nearly impossible to escape from without external help and perspective. This phrase appears in its most dangerous form after incidents of abuse or serious mistreatment. You made me so angry I couldn't control myself. I wouldn't have said that if you hadn't provoked me. This is what happens when you push me too far. You know what happens when you act like this. Why do you keep doing it? I didn't want to do this, but you left me no choice with your behavior. Look what you made me do. This is your fault for not listening when I warned you. If you had just done what I asked, this wouldn't have happened. Notice the complete abdication of responsibility in every variation. The manipulator had no choice in their actions. They were forced by your behavior to respond this way, like a puppet controlled by your strings. You are the cause of everything bad that happens. They are merely the unfortunate effect of your provocations. This flips the script entirely, transforming them from aggressor to victim, and you from victim to aggressor. You become responsible for the harm done to you, which is perhaps the cruelest form of psychological abuse possible. The psychological devastation of accepting this responsibility is profound and life-altering. The victim begins believing they have the power to prevent abuse by controlling their own behavior perfectly, by never making mistakes, by anticipating needs, by reading minds. They become hyper-vigilant about avoiding triggers, walking on eggshells constantly, managing the manipulator's emotions like it's their job. They blame themselves entirely for incidents of mistreatment. After all, if they hadn't said that thing, done that thing, looked that way, forgotten that task, asked that question, the abuse wouldn't have happened. This creates what domestic violence experts and researchers call the perfect victim syndrome, where victims believe that if they could just be perfect enough, kind enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, the abuse would stop completely. But it never stops, because the abuse was never about the victim's behavior in the first place. It was always about the abuser's need for control, for power, for domination. The victim could be absolutely perfect and the abuse would continue, because perfection isn't actually the goal. Control is the goal. And accepting responsibility for the abuser's behavior gives them complete control. Research on domestic violence and psychological abuse consistently identifies victim blaming as one of the most damaging components of abuse, both in terms of psychological harm and in terms of trapping victims in dangerous situations. When perpetrators successfully convince victims that they caused the abuse through their own behavior, victims become trapped in several ways simultaneously and completely. They believe leaving won't help because they'll just cause problems in the next relationship with their flawed behavior. They believe they deserve the mistreatment because they caused it through their actions. They believe they have the power to fix things by changing themselves, by finally getting it right, by becoming whatever the abuser claims to need. All of these beliefs keep victims locked in dangerous situations while simultaneously destroying their mental health, their sense of self, and their belief in their own worth and judgment. The manipulator has effectively convinced the victim to police themselves, to blame themselves, to punish themselves. The control becomes internal rather than external, which means it operates even when the abuser isn't present. The victim carries the abuser's voice inside their own head. Understanding these 7 phrases is the first and most critical step toward freedom from manipulation. Recognition creates psychological distance between you and the manipulation. Once you can identify these manipulation tactics clearly, once you can name them when they're happening, they lose some of their power over your thoughts and feelings. You start seeing the pattern instead of believing the content of what's being said. You notice that "you're too sensitive" always appears when you express hurt at their behavior, that "I'm just being honest" precedes deliberate cruelty disguised as truth, that "you're so lucky I put up with you" emerges when you assert needs or set boundaries, that comparisons intensify when you're feeling good about yourself and they need to knock you down, that questioning your sanity happens when you're accurately identifying manipulation and they need you to doubt yourself. That proof of love is demanded when you set healthy boundaries or prioritize your own well-being. That blame for their behavior appears immediately after they've caused serious harm and need to avoid accountability. The pattern becomes visible, the machinery becomes obvious, and visibility is the beginning of immunity from the manipulation's effects. But recognition alone isn't enough to heal from years of this manipulation. These phrases have already done significant damage to your psyche. They've shaped how you see yourself, how you understand your worth, how you interpret your own emotions and needs. They've created neural pathways in your brain that automatically respond to criticism with self-doubt, to boundaries with guilt, to self-advocacy with shame, to your own needs with the belief that you're being difficult or demanding. Healing from this manipulation requires more than just identifying it intellectually. It requires actively rebuilding your sense of self from the ground up. This means learning to trust your perceptions again after they've been systematically undermined. Validating your own emotions instead of dismissing them as oversensitivity. Recognizing that sensitivity is not weakness, but evidence of emotional depth and empathy. Understanding that someone's claimed honesty doesn't obligate you to accept cruelty as truth. Knowing that you're not difficult or burdensome simply for having normal human needs for respect and care. Refusing to measure yourself against others who are living completely different lives with different circumstances. Trusting your sanity and your grip on reality even when it's questioned by others. Understanding that love shouldn't require constant proof through compliance and sacrifice of self. And accepting at the deepest level that you're never, ever responsible for someone else's choice to harm you, regardless of what you did or didn't do. This rebuilding process takes substantial time,
and almost always requires support from others who understand trauma and manipulation. Therapy can be invaluable, particularly with a therapist specifically trained in trauma, emotional abuse, and recovery from manipulative relationships. Support groups connect you with others who understand these dynamics from personal experience and can validate that what you experienced was real and damaging. Books and resources on emotional abuse provide validation, education, and practical strategies for recovery. Trusted friends and family members can offer perspective and remind you of who you were before the manipulation took hold of your self-concept. Journaling helps you track patterns, trust your memory when it's being questioned, and process the complex emotions that arise during recovery. All of these tools and resources work together, synergistically, to help you reclaim your sense of self from someone who systematically dismantled it through carefully chosen words, repeated over time. Recovery is absolutely possible. You can learn to trust yourself again. You can rebuild your self-worth from the ashes. But it requires deep commitment to your own healing and willingness to see the manipulation clearly, without minimizing or excusing it any longer. The most important thing to understand, the foundation of all healing, is this: you are not the problem. You never were. These phrases worked not because you're too sensitive, too difficult, too crazy, too unlovable, too demanding, or too anything negative. They worked because they're specifically designed to work on normal human psychology. They exploit universal human vulnerabilities that everyone has: the need for connection, the desire for approval, the tendency towards self-doubt, the fear of abandonment, the hope that people we love will change. Your reaction to manipulation doesn't make you weak or foolish. It makes you human, with normal human responses to abnormal and deliberate psychological attacks. The shame you feel doesn't prove you're flawed at your core. It proves you were targeted by someone who understood how to weaponize language for control. The self-doubt you experience constantly isn't evidence of your inadequacy or unreliability. It's evidence of sustained psychological attack designed specifically to create that doubt. You were not broken before this relationship. You were systematically broken down during it through deliberate or unconscious manipulation. And that distinction matters enormously for your recovery, because things that are broken down through external force can be built back up with support and commitment. If you recognized yourself in this exploration, if these 7 phrases sounded painfully familiar, if you felt that uncomfortable recognition of your own relationships, past or present, know that you're not alone in this experience. Millions of people are experiencing this manipulation right now as you watch this. Some are just beginning to recognize it and questioning whether what they're experiencing is really abuse. Others have been trapped in it for years or decades, unable to name what's happening or believe it's real. Many have escaped physically, but are still healing from the deep psychological damage that remains long after the relationship ends. Wherever you are in this journey of recognition and healing, know that what you experienced is real and valid. Your hurt is legitimate. Your confusion makes complete sense given what you were subjected to. And your worth was never determined by someone else's manipulative assessment of you. You are enough exactly as you are. You always were enough. The manipulation convinced you otherwise through systematic attacks. But manipulation isn't truth. It's a carefully constructed lie designed to control you and keep you small. And now that you can see the lie clearly, you can start dismantling it piece by piece. If you recognized yourself or your relationships in this video, don't stay silent about what you're experiencing or have experienced. Share this with someone you trust completely.
Talk about what you're going through or what you survived. Silence protects manipulation, while exposure weakens its power dramatically. The more you talk about these patterns, the less power they have over you, and the clearer you can see reality. And sharing this video might help someone else recognize their own situation. Someone who needs this information as desperately as you might have needed it before you found it. Knowledge is genuinely protective. Awareness is power. The more people understand how manipulation works at the mechanical level, the less effective it becomes in the broader culture. Be part of breaking the silence around psychological abuse that keeps so many people trapped. In the next video, we'll explore in practical detail how victims of verbal manipulation reclaim their voice and rebuild their self-worth from the ground up. We'll discuss specific, actionable strategies for deprogramming the negative beliefs these phrases created and installed in your psyche. We'll talk about setting firm boundaries with manipulators and enforcing those boundaries, or leaving safely if necessary for your well-being. We'll examine how to trust your perceptions again after they've been systematically undermined for months or years. We'll discuss building a support system that can help you reality test and stay grounded. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because understanding the manipulation is step one. Learning to heal from it and protect yourself going forward is step two. Your journey toward reclaiming yourself and your sense of worth starts with awareness, and it continues with intentional action and commitment to your own healing. You deserve relationships where words build you up instead of systematically tearing you down, where honesty is delivered with kindness, where love is freely given, not endlessly proven through tests and sacrifice, where your worth is recognized and celebrated, not constantly questioned and diminished. That kind of relationship is possible and achievable, but first, you have to recognize and remove yourself from the one that's destroying you from the inside out.